Hello and welcome to my first ever Let's Doodle video. These videos are intended to give you a little bit of inspiration and a few tips and tricks along the way. There's a lot of videos out there that will just show you the drawing, and I do those as well, and if you'd like to see those, I post one of those every Tuesday. So last year I produced a few little videos called The Beginner's Guide to Doodling, and it was a very basic introduction to just getting started with doodling, and they got such good feedback that I thought it might be useful to some of you for me just to talk through my drawings as I'm doing them. It gives you a chance to draw along if you wish, or you can just sit back with a cup of tea and just watch and hear me natter. So this video is bubbles and lines. I'm just going to use a selection of circles and lines and produce a picture. I'm using a sheet of A4 cartridge paper and a black marker pen and a black gel pen. If you're having a go at this yourself, do not feel that you've got to do it on A4 size. I started out doing my drawings on A5 and that was a perfect size for me as a beginner. It wasn't too daunting and there wasn't too much space to fill. For the circles, I am using my circle template. If you don't have one of these, you can just find something, anything to draw around. You don't have to do your circles the same size as mine. Before I got my circle template, for small circles, I drew around this pencil sharpener. It's much easier to draw around the inside of something than the outside of something, and these circle templates are quite inexpensive. But if you don't have one and you just want to give it a go, you can use a roll of sellotape, large or small, just for your own homemade circle template. That's what I used for a long time before I purchased this. So I like to draw a border around my page, just so that I don't have to draw directly up to the edge of the page. Because when I'm adding colour, I find it very difficult to colour in right to the edge of the page. That might just be me, but I do find it's nice to have an internal frame for your picture. So I've just drawn my border with my black marker pen and a ruler. So what I'm going to do is draw a selection of circles on the page. I'm using the largest circle on my circle template, and I'm drawing 3 along the top, not all in a straight line. And then in the middle of the page I'm going to draw another 3 circles. I'm not spacing them evenly, these are just going randomly on the page. I'm not thinking too hard about my placement of these circles. And at the bottom I'm just going to draw 2 circles, and those are my final circles for this drawing. So now what I'm going to do is draw a series of lines across the page. I'm aiming to intersect all of the circles, but the first curve that I did, I missed the middle circle on the top. I'm not worried about that because I'm going to draw 3 more lines across the page with the aim to intersect the last circle. Now I'm not thinking too hard about these lines. My aim is just to create some sections on the page which we can work with later. So I've drawn 6 across the page and I'm going to draw 3 more. For these last lines, I'm not too worried whether or not I intersect all of the circles. And although I'm thinking a little bit about the placement of the lines, I'm not overthinking it. My marker pen here is running out a little bit, so I'm just putting some thicker lines on. And then it's just a case of curving out all the corners as you would for neurographic art. If you're not sure how to do this, it's very simple. You just pick a point on the line and curve it round to join up the adjacent and then fill it in. This is a very, very relaxing process. You don't have to think too hard about it. For this part of the drawing, I'm using my black gel pen. Now, I know a lot of people use the Unipin pens. My preference, just for practice, is the gel pens. They're very smooth to work with. They glide very well on the cartridge paper. But the only downside is that occasionally they will smudge, so I try not to work over myself. And if you've watched any of my full process videos, you'll see that occasionally I do smudge my gel pen. Gel pens are very inexpensive to buy, but they come in all shapes and sizes. I have mentioned this before. So some gel pens are not indelible. The Sharpie S gels are not. They run every time I use my Inktense pencils with them or my watercolour paints. So this is why I prefer this very cheap brand of gel pens, because then even if I haven't decided which art medium I'm going to use for the colour, I know I've got that choice. So just work your way around the page, and every time the lines intersect each other, just curve them off. So I'm going to fast forward the video at this point. So if you're drawing along, do pause it, and when you've finished curving off all of the corners, then you can press play again. I haven't noticed yet, but I have forgotten to curve off the corner here, but I will come back to that later. So what I'm doing is I'm choosing some of the sections, and I'm just drawing with my gel pen a few millimeters from the edge and creating these additional sections inside. As you're doing this, don't worry too much if your lines are wobbly or wiggly or they don't exactly follow the curve of the shape on the page. Quite often this creates a more interesting picture, and at this stage, if you're a beginner, I would encourage you not to take your work too seriously at this point. Just have a play, get used to the lines, get used to the paper. So on the middle section, I've split the new sections up into two, even though I could have made them one. This is just to add a little bit of extra interest to the page, and I didn't really want one of these inner sections to take up all of the space. If you're having a go at this yourself, you can fill in all the sections, every other section. It's totally up to you. I would really encourage you to put your own twist on these drawings. Now I'm going to fill in these sections with just some straight lines. Now these straight lines take a little bit of practice if you're not used to doing them. Occasionally some of my lines go a little bit wibbly and wobbly, but I don't stress over that either. It actually seems to work somehow even when things go slightly awry. So these lines I'm spacing about 2 millimeters away from each other, and I find it a lot easier going from left to right. Now I'm right-handed, as you can see, and you might find an easier way for you. I find if I'm moving the pen from right to left, I tend to go at a slight angle. But sometimes it's necessary to do that, especially if I don't want to work over myself. The easiest way to not overshoot your line is to watch exactly where you want your pen to stop. So you place your pen on the lower line. Don't watch the nib of the pen, watch the point you want it to get to. And for some reason this works very well in producing straight lines across the page. If some of your lines are not equally spaced, again, don't stress, don't worry. It won't affect the overall look of a practice piece of your drawing. The more you draw these lines, the better you'll become at making them straight. Sometimes all my lines are perfectly straight, and sometimes if I'm a little bit tired or distracted, they get a little bit wibbly wobbly. Don't stress, it's just practice. We're not trying to create a masterpiece at this point. We're just trying to learn some new skills to help us on our way. I use these lines quite a lot in many of my drawings. They add a bit of tone to the page, and they're so simple to do. They don't require an awful lot of thought, and for someone that's dealing with fatigue on a daily basis, this is perfect. I also find when you're drawing these lines that you need to give your wrist enough room to move across the page, and also enough support. If I'm drawing in my sketchbook, I find it very difficult to get the right support, as quite often my wrist will be hanging off the end of the sketchbook. But drawing on a loose sheet of paper on a table, I find it much easier to give my wrist and my hand the right level of support as I'm drawing the lines across the page. So I'm going to fast forward again as I fill in all of these sections. So if you are drawing along with me, then you can pause the video, and when you've finished filling in all your sections, we'll move on to the next part. So now I'm ready to put a little bit of colour on, and I'm going to show you two examples for the colour here. For the first example, I'm going to be using my Decotime Colouring Pencils. Now I'm still very much a beginner using these colouring pencils, so bear with me. If you've got any extra tips or tricks to share, do drop them in the comments below. So initially I'm just going to colour the circle with a lightish blue, and I'm holding the pencil quite close to the end so that I can give a very light pressure, but also it helps to maintain that pressure. I'm also putting the pigment on the page in small circles. You can see I'm just drifting that around. So now I've chosen a slightly lighter blue, and I've moved my hand further down the pencil. With small circles, I am just blending in the darker colour that I've just laid down with the lighter colour that I'm now putting on the page. As I'm working my way around, I am applying slightly more pressure around the outer edges of the circle. Now, this is a tip that I picked up on a video that I watched several months ago. They recommended blending your coloured pencil with a cotton bud. Now, I'm fairly sure that you can buy proper blender sticks, and I am going to look into that and see if that works as well. But for this drawing, I'm just using a cotton bud, and I'm making small circles and large circles just to blend in the colours that I've put on the page. So going back to my first colour, I'm going to use a little bit harder pressure. I've moved my hand further down the pencil, and what I'm trying to do is create a slightly darker edge all the way around the edge of the circle. Now there are better ways to create bubbles and effects, but I'm still a beginner with coloured pencil, but I thought I'd just share this technique with you anyway, in case it's useful. So once again, I am using small circles, and as I come closer to the centre of the circle, I am using less pressure, and I'm keeping a close eye on where I need to put a little bit more pigment down. And now I've chosen a darker blue still, just to put a little bit more definition around the outer edge of the circle. So you'll see I'm not really using too many circular motions with this pencil. I am a little, but from time to time I am going right up to the edge of the circle and marking in with very short dashes just to fill in the space around the edge of the circle. I haven't found a better way to do this, and these coloured pencils, they are not premium coloured pencils, they are budget really. They're not super budget pencils, but they're relatively cheap and you get a lot of pencils for your money, so that's why I chose them. So going back to the lighter colour pencil now, I'm now blending in and keeping a watchful eye out on where I need to add a little bit more of the darker pencils, and coming back and blending in as appropriate. This is a really relaxing technique. It's not a rush job, but you can see as I'm building up the colour how we're getting that graduated effect. And then once the colour's down, I'm going back to the cotton bud to just rub it all in and blend it in for a really smooth finish. Now this really does give a smooth finish. What it does is it pushes the pigment into all the little dips on the paper. Now this is cartridge paper, so it's not super smooth paper. I haven't tried these colouring pencils on a smoother paper yet, but I will. So I'm taking my time, just filling in any gaps and really trying to work it so that the colours are blended. I'm not pressing too hard, I'm just trying to give a light coverage and adding the colours slowly. I'm sure there's many of you watching this video who have got lots to share with me in using colouring pencils, and also actually if you've got some tips on the best colouring pencils to buy, I will be looking to upgrade these at some point to a better quality set of colouring pencils, so your thoughts would be much appreciated. So continue doing this shading technique for all of the bubbles on the page. If you're drawing along with me and you need to go back to the first circle to reference, I've put timestamps in the video description so you can just click and re-watch that part if you need to. So once again, I'm going to fast forward on this drawing until I've finished the last bubble. So I'm just putting the finishing touches to the last bubble. I'm quite pleased with that. I really like the overall effect that I've achieved. But of course, if you don't have colouring pencils, you can choose any art medium that you choose. So this one is a slight variation on the first one. I've drawn a selection of large circles and medium-sized circles on the page. I've filled in the gaps with the same technique and it's produced quite a different result. And on this one I'm going to fill the circles in with some drawing ink. Now I like to use the Winsor and Newton Drawing Ink, not because it's the best, but that's what I've grown up with. I do intend on trying some different brands of ink over the course of the year, and I think it would be interesting to compare these at some point, so do keep an eye on my arty updates because that's where I'll be posting everything like that. So with the drawing ink, what I find is that you don't want to have too much ink on your brush, but you also don't want to thin out the ink on the page. I like the drawing ink when you get a really bold coverage, and sometimes that takes 2 coats, and I'll leave the first coat to dry and then go back to it. But with a process of trial and error, if you can get the brush nicely loaded, you can fill in a certain size section without having to dip back into your inkwell. I find that the best technique to use is to use your brush to work around the curves and the lines that are on the page, and I usually work left to right. If I go right to left, I quite often end up overshooting the lines with the ink, but yeah, that's another story. So you can see I'm working left to right, and again if you're left-handed you'll probably find it easier to work the other way around. For these smaller sections I will fill them all in together because my brush is fully loaded. Gosh, I don't know what size paintbrush I'm using here, but it has got a very nice point on it. You will get a feel for just how much ink to get on your paintbrush. This is a very relaxing process. It's a quick way of finishing off a picture with some bold colour. You don't want to let the ink dry before you've finished colouring a section, so it's quite important if you feel like the ink is running out on the paintbrush, don't keep spreading it out along the section. Go back to your ink well, dip your brush in and go back to it. If you let it dry, you won't be able to reblend it in. So I hope that this has given you a little introduction on how to use circles and lines for a very simple design. Don't forget to save it to your watch later playlist so that you can come back to it as a reference if you want to. You can add your own spin to it, you can add more sections, you can add more bubbles, and I quite likely probably will at some point because this is a very relaxing style and I really enjoy doing it, and quite often I will go back and revisit some of my designs that I've done in the past. But yeah, just because I've used colouring pencil and drawing ink, don't forget you can use watercolour paints, you can use acrylic paints, you could use marker pens or felt tips or gel pens, whatever you've got to hand. I would like to encourage you, if you are starting out and you want to give this a try, you don't need to go out and buy special equipment just for the basic drawing. You just need a sheet of paper and a couple of pens. So thank you for watching. Do give me a thumbs up if you've made it this far, or if you found this video useful or helpful in any way. I will be aiming to post a new Let's Doodle video every 2 weeks,